You served two tours in Vietnam. The first one you arrive in January 66 and you serve with the 1st Cav in the Central Highlands. You return for your second tour in October 68 and now you're with the 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong Delta. And it just strikes me that these are very, very different tours, just what the terrain is like, perhaps what the combat is like. And so I wonder, to kind of throw a very big question at you at the beginning, how would you compare and contrast these two tours in very different parts of the country?
Well, the difference is dramatic.
Yeah.
Let's speak of the physical environment. Mountainous jungle, while it offers up a lot of opportunities to injure yourself or be bitten or stung by something that could threaten your life or take your life. But if I were at this point given the choice of going back and serving in a military capacity, especially as an infantryman, of one of the other places, I'd choose the Central Highlands. Hands over, believe me, because it was the population density was far less, um, and therefore we had a lot of latitude on how we could go about moving about discreetly in the jungle without the enemy knowing really which route we were going to take, and it denied him his ability to set booby traps in our way. The casualties from the 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong region down there, Delta region, I would very high percentage of those in the battalion I was in came from booby traps because we were so much more predictable and so much more visual because the Delta is the rice growing uh, heart of South Vietnam, period. That's why it was important to the Viet Cong, and the population density had a lot to do with the emphasis by the Viet Cong in persuading the peasant population, or let's just call them the outlying population, to believe in their cause and support them. So population density has a whole lot to do with what happened to us down there because we couldn't call in uh, uh, indirect fire weapons handily because of too many layers of clearances because of the population. Too many authorities had to say on whether or not that fire mission request would be approved. In the Central Highlands, oh man, we used to do a reconnaissance in fire with the 105 millimeter howitzers. We would walk them ahead of us. That's a good handy tool to have, but you can't do that in the South. You
Wow.
could.
Does that mean then in the Delta that the number of or that contact is more frequent just because you have more people bumping into each other, contact meaning firefights,
Mhm.
other combat related incidents? Were they more frequent in the Delta than they were in the Central Highlands?
Yes, by far. The enemy's capabilities to, should they choose to engage you themselves, either at their own initiative or if you walked into a situation where they were prepared for you. His ability with the North Vietnamese regulars was far superior. They were able to bring in a lot of heavy weapons that the Viet Cong and the Delta could not bring in because of the limitation of overland transportation and the fact that we watched it very closely, and that most everything that was brought in had to be brought in at some point by water.
Mm.
And we 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 interdicted them a lot. Let's just say it that way, and put them at the bottom of those canals at night.
You mean the sampans coming in with
Yeah,
contraband? Yeah.
right.
So my assumption then is that in the Central Highlands you're dealing primarily with NVA, and in the Mekong you're dealing primarily with VC. Is that right?
That's a good general statement. Yes, very good. Yeah.
And how would you describe the difference in the combat experience? You faced VC a number of times, a lot. You faced NVA a number of times. After a while, after these two experiences, when you look back on it, or even when you're on the ground, was there a discernible difference that you could tell just even how a fight works out? You know, this is NVA we're against, this is VC we're against.
Well, I'm sure you're very familiar with the eye ring, and that right there told you, reveals a lot about the capabilities of the North Vietnamese. Uh, they were far, like I said, they had far superior weaponry. They had more of it. The Viet Cong, I mean, frankly, we were mortared more than once by 120 millimeter mortars, and I swear I don't know how they could bring in that many a weapon of that size itself and enough ammunition to fire like 20 rounds at us at a time. That's a lot of weight that they managed to bring in there and take to some solid ground someplace so that they could have a fairly steady base plate, a steady weapon from which to fire and expect it to hit the target. They were, they, but that was rare. Now, the North Vietnamese, they had more heavy machine guns. And when a 50 caliber weapon, when those things fire up, you pay a lot of attention to them. They also had some small artillery, we call them pack howitzers, and mortars, and they were well trained from a tactical standpoint. And when they put in an ambush, if we walked into it, it could be catastrophic. They were good at what they did. Now, the Viet Cong were just masters at disappearing. Their abilities to camouflage and hide were the best, of course, I've ever seen.
What you described about the Viet Cong, they're masters of disappearing. What impact does that have on your relations with Vietnamese? And I say civilians, understanding sometimes you need to put that word in quotation marks. You know, what impact did that have when you see, women, boys, others in these sampans, knowing that the Viet Cong are all around, knowing that the Viet Cong are disappearing? That must have had some kind of psychological impact on how you looked at Vietnamese folks generally, or did it not?
Well, yeah, but I can speak about my own assumptions here. The peasantry really they were caught in between us meaning the U.S. forces, the ARVN. If there were popular forces or regional forces, they're militias, but uh, they tolerate, don't not necessarily support, but they tolerate the man with the gun. As I said, that's a slogan I have. The man with the gun is the boss. The minute you stop appreciating that fact, could be when you lose your life. And so we might go through a village in the daytime and they're smile and they're all nice and sweet. And at night, the Viet Cong comes in and visits his wife, who is one of those female peasants standing there smiling at you. And he may be a farmer one day and a Viet Cong at night. They're very good at this kind of deception. Uh, that's the nature of a guerrilla war. Who is the enemy?
Given the reality you've just described, by the end of your second tour, you've seen a lot more combat in Vietnam by the end of your second tour than, the vast majority of Vietnam vets in two very different parts of the country and at two very different eras in the war, starting in early 66 and then latter 68. So your experience in Vietnam is very broad and deep. By the end of your second tour, did you think that the South Vietnamese cause was winnable?
I I seriously doubted that we had the people in broad language had the tolerance and the will to win that war. But because we were weakened by our own issues, and racial problems was one of our big issues. It was definitely a big issue, and the NCOs had pretty well given up on that war, as they say, and they say when the non-commissioned officers give up on it, you're in trouble.
And do you think the NCOs gave up on it because they felt that you often, veterans often say, not all veterans, there's, as with a lot of things in the war, there's disagreement, but a good number of veterans say that they felt that they had their hands tied. That, for example, you mentioned several minutes ago, if we want to call in a fire mission, it has to go through multiple layers to be approved, and by that time the VC are gone. Are the NCOs giving up on the war so far as you can see, at least in part because they feel like their hands are tied and they can't really prosecute this thing?
I believe that was a concern, especially in some areas. Now, the Central Highlands, they would attack us across the river to the west of Pleiku. And at that time, the First Cav Division was across in the what they call two corps, the Central Highlands, and they were not north of there. We operated from the South China Sea coast all the way to the border, the western border of Vietnam, and they could escape across the river and get away from us. And
Yeah, so they cross the border, and as soon as they cross the border, you're powerless to do anything about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
we could sneak maybe some artillery on them, something like that, but we couldn't cross over, in major unit size or anything. I did have a couple of troops. Sometimes at a unit meeting we would have to discuss things. And one of my braver young soldiers asked me, "Well, Captain, how do we, why are we actually fighting this war?" And I think it was an honest, heartfelt question.
What did you say when the soldier asked you that? What was
Uh,
the answer?
well, I would say, well, my information is that we're here fighting communism, but that has a weak sound to it, because the government, in my judgment, did not make the case sufficiently to the American public. The frustration among my troops, frustration was high because of the booby traps and the snipers, and how we would be, pushed out into these remote areas of the Delta, and to find the enemy and kill him. That was our purpose. Unfortunately, the terrain prevented us from being effective a lot, but set him up in a good position to exact a price on us with impunity. And my soldiers were so frustrated, and so was I. My frustration level was really high because those booby traps took out a lot of us. We had no target on which to exact our revenge. They were elusive and difficult, and they were clever. The underlying premise of an insurgency is, if it wants to survive, is the insurgents don't accept decisive engagement unless they believe they have a clear advantage. Otherwise, it's shoot, kill, and run. Fight another day. That's not decisive combat. And they were good at that. We were inserted multiple times by riverine assets, the old steel boats, but also air cushion vehicles. I hated those things with a passion. They didn't carry many people. You were on top of the thing. You couldn't hear an RPG if it exploded in your back pocket, because it's so loud with those propellers. And then this air cushion vehicle has to have that cushion. And if it runs over something that denies those or compromises those pressures under there, it bottoms out and it's stuck right there. So they would take us up the river, and when we'd come to the point to be inserted, these huge trees had these huge root complexes that went out over the water. At one point, they were on solid land, probably, but the erosion was such that they would have to stop right at the edge of those roots, and we had to make our way all the way to land. It might have been 10 yards, walking on wet, slippery roots to try to get there. I had guys falling through right and left. Uh, the steel boats though, they could ram the shore. When you reached the end of that ramp, you were on solid ground probably. In '69, I know. Well, I think even yeah, in '69, I know they brought in these. They were swift boat types that they eventually began calling Zippo. They could project a flame with napalm, a mixture in it, for about 400 meters. Think about that for a minute.
Well, yeah.
And those little guys who would be bold enough to get close to the shore and launch an RPG, okay, he might do one, but he was going to be a fried cookie before that was over with. Those things were absolutely, they made a big difference because the enemy was far less bold enough to launch anything from the shore of the river because he was going to be fried. We air assaulted into an area one day, and it was about mid-morning by the time we got there, and it was there was a little village nestled in an intersection of a pretty large canal and the river itself. So you had a lot of water. And where that canal intersected, it was wide. And my battalion commander told me to send some troops down to check on there were two or three large sampans. They weren't really sampans, they were boats. He told me to send some troops down to check them out. I sent three guys. And went down and they didn't even get to those boats before the enemy opened up on the other side. They were very likely guerrillas. They had AK-47s. In no time at all, I had three guys wounded down there. And before I know it, my two radio operators and I were about 70 yards or so from there on a little knoll where I could see what was going on down there. Because I had platoons on my left and in the middle, and then I had another platoon over here on my right. And these guys came from a central platoon. It was just part of a squad, like I think three guys.
Hmm.
And they put some rounds past my one RTO and me. I was speaking over the radio because by that time I was calling for medevac, and he was standing nearby because the cord of the microphone to the radio is short. Well, they put a round through the insect repellent bottle in my helmet.
Wow.
He hit the ground yelling, "Oh, oh," and holding his face. I thought he was hitting the face. The insect repellent hit him in the eyes.
Wow.
That stuff is vicious. Oh, it's just vicious. Anyway, and but still they were firing, and we were shooting back. No, I was not. I was busy, and I left the shooting back to the platoon that was in the middle, and didn't want to shoot over these guys, of course.
Right.
And it's my place more to take care of the troops and orchestrate the fight, if you will, rather than being a fighting man. But of course, we ducked down. We were lying on the ground. They were still shooting over our heads, and my senior medic was crawling, trying to get to one of the guys that was wounded really badly. He had a severed femur and femur artery. And I don't need to tell you the risk, you know, his risk element.
Right.
So we were delayed a bit. The medic was delayed a bit in getting to him, understandably. The man's, you know, he's having to crawl very carefully to try to avoid being hit. They were firing at us. Well, that body of water was so vast, you know, we couldn't go after them right away. We couldn't with ground troops, no way. So I called artillery in, but it took a while to get it, and they enjoyed themselves for a while. And we were still shooting
Shooting
back.
at you, yeah.
That platoon, they were hammering them, the M60s going and M79s and what have you. But they had fortified bunkers, I believe, so we weren't very effective against them. And uh, that was just tragic. I had two men who, well, the one man who had a femur artery severed actually died.
You did.
He died of shock, and you know what shock is. Basically, the loss of blood. Your body can't function, and it shuts down. And we all thought he was going to make it because the medic applied a tourniquet. By that time, you know, that artery is a big one, and you can lose a lot of blood in a hurry. We all thought he was going to make it, but he didn't. And when his fellow platoon members found out, some of them, they knew him and had his home address. They wrote his mother telling her that it looked like things moved too slowly. You know, maybe he could have lived but you know, the helicopter, the medevac couldn't get in so long as the artillery's firing. We wanted to, and once the artillery started firing, basically it stopped. You know, those guys ran because they knew I was going to adjust the rounds right in on them. And this mother wrote me. She was distraught. You know, please tell me how my son died and why. Because it seems, based upon what I've heard from his fellow soldiers, that he should have lived. Okay. So I drafted up a letter. At least I had the common sense to realize that I'd better run this by my battalion commander first. He told me, absolutely not. He says, it's well written, George. You did a good job, and she would benefit from this. But we're not allowed to do that. There has to be a response has to go from JAG, the Judge Advocate General, and it'll be a form letter. That's all she'll get. Well, it was very disturbing. I really don't think you ever get over that.
What did you tell her in the letter?
Well, I explained. It was it was more than one page. I explained in excruciating detail the situation. It was far from being simple. Uh, we were all in great danger. The enemy had the advantage to a degree, and I did relate to her how her son was loved, and appreciated, and how popular he was. A young soldier like that with a good attitude has a an effect on others, and that was him. That was Ski. Very handsome young man, very smart, and
As you look back on that, as an officer, of course, you obey the orders of your superior. And so your superior said you can't send the letter. The response needs to go out from JAG. As you look back on it, is there part of you, though, that wishes that you had just sent the letter anyway?
Well, probably, but the battalion commander told me not. I mean, I was not so much career minded. Frankly, by the time that experience was behind me, I'd resigned myself that I wasn't going back. I would resign my commission and leave. The career in the army wasn't that important to me because I know I was damn lucky to be alive. I had people shot around me so close. They were after they were after me, man, and they could figure out who the leaders were. You put a handset, let them see you put a handset and talk in it. They know the sniper knows that's you. You're the man. And at all levels, that's why a lot of the lieutenants died the way they did.
The bullet takes out the insect repellent right here on your helmet. So it's obviously a very close call.
Yeah.
Did you know immediately that that's what had happened?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the RTO told me they hit your insect repellent bottle and it came in my eyes. Oh yeah. He was blinded for about 30 minutes. I
So
mean, I don't mean literally, but he was unable to. His eyes were burning so much he was washing his eyes with canteen water, trying to get that stuff out of his eyes. Anyway, go ahead.
So when does that really settle in? Because I'm imagining you're so focused on what's going on, this information comes in that a bullet's just gone, what, maybe 2.5 inches from my head here, taking out my insect repellent, splashed my RTO in the face. So you know that as a fact, but at what point does that settle in, how close you came to buying it?
There were other incidents, real close, real close. Oh, it settled in all right, but I couldn't dwell on that. I just couldn't. A young man named Bronner from Kentucky was killed one day. We had to cross a big canal by sampan. We'd have to stretch a rope across and 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 borrow some sampans from the local villagers, a couple, so we could ferry ourselves across. It was a big, wide, fast-moving water, drown you in a minute, but you couldn't stand up. Period. It would take you under. Uh, and he swam across and with the rope and tied it to a tree on the other side so we could tie it to a tree on the near side and ferry ourselves across. He helped me out of the sampan I was in because the bank was muddy and he still was shirtless and he was in his bare feet because he swam across and his clothes were and his gun were his M16 were coming in the next sampan behind us. Uh, but he was helping us out of the sampans because we stepped into mud. Okay, he helped me. I moved up. I released his hand and I took one step and I heard the pop. They were going to hit me in the head and it hit him just below his ear. Instantly, dead. That one got me. If I hadn't taken that step, it would have been me. But those things happen, those things happen. Uh, but you can't don't think I was not aware of it. But I can't go around ducking behind trees. You know what would that do with my troops? I had to just try to be careful. If I was going to talk over the radio, try to move so there's I'm next to a tree somewhere. Of course, you may not know exactly where he might be, but they were very good at shooting us across a body of water because they knew we could not get across it quickly and go after them, and they had time to run.
I'm assuming this incident with Bronner, I mean, I'm assuming it leads to what you hear so often, just that thinking, why him, not me? Um, you know, kind of these thoughts that you can never really resolve. Why him, not me? And
I don't dwell on it. It can hurt you over time. Yeah. The life expectancy, let's say, in command at any level in an infantry unit, company command and below, company platoon, the life expectancy was less than 4 months, meaning they were either relieved for whatever reason, they were wounded, or were incapacitated by the environment. There's a lot of disease, just fungus, immersion foot, uh, snakes, leeches. I wrote
mosquitoes.
about that too. And
Sure.
leeches out in the plain of reeds, it's hard for the average American to comprehend how many leeches are there and how thirsty they are and how good they are at sucking your blood. And if you remove him, you're still going to bleed a while, unless you've got styptic or something, because he injected an anticoagulant that helps him, that facilitates his drinking of your blood. That's just the way it is. And that one time when I was nearly medevaced, I wasn't I wasn't suffering from exhaustion. I was suffering from lack of blood, I believe. They had really chowed down on me, and all of us, not just me, all of us. They can take a lot of your blood because of the numbers. There's a lot of leeches there.
I mean, the leeches, you write about the centipedes, you got the snakes, the mosquitoes, the obviously the enemy, the heat, the humidity, it just the rain, the monsoons, it just seems like there aren't a whole lot of breaks
There aren't
for you guys out in the jungle.
in the Delta. At least our upper echelon commanders realized that they put us out for, let's say, a 3-day air assault missions, because they would assault you into an area, you sweep it. If you find the enemy, you kill him, he kills you, or whatever. When that's done, you get in the planes again, the choppers, and you go to another target. And that goes on, and you ambush canals at night. It can wear a guy out. By the time when I arrived in October, I was 180 pounds, solid muscle, coming from the 82nd Airborne Division, fit the fittest of my life. Uh, 27 years old. When I finished that command, I weighed 155,
Wow.
25 pounds less, and I wasn't sick. It wore me out. That you cannot understand what it is to walk in a rice paddy that is uh, has the required amount of water in it and has been softened to accommodate rice planting, with a pack on your back and a gun in your hand and a steel pot. You can't appreciate what that does to you unless you do it. My battalion commander told me one day, he said, "George, I'm gonna I'm gonna come down with this air assault you're on, and I'm gonna walk with you guys for a while." I said, "Yes, sir. Come on down." Now, this man was commissioned in Korea. He knew how to be an infantry. You know, you couldn't pull the wool over this guy's eyes. And he came down and he stayed with us about 2 hours. He said, George, thank you." He says, "I'm pretty well done." Well, this time he was in his early 40s. He was a good, solid infantryman, but 40 is ancient when it comes to that kind of warfare. Uh, 35 is old. 40 is ancient, because it robs the body of everything in it. Losing so many fellow soldiers to booby traps, and no enemy upon whom we could exact our revenge. It reached a point where I could not trust them necessarily with a POW. And I understood that. And in one case, I was in a position to be the only person who saw that Viet Cong raise his rifle to shoot toward my lieutenant, and I shot the Viet Cong before he could get around off. So that was my kill. It's not often that I was able to know that I killed somebody as opposed to some of my troops. Because a lot of times the enemy that was dead may have 10 holes in him. We don't know who hit him, even if I was shooting. I never knew, if I was the one who put him down. But I felt good about that. I felt good about killing the enemy soldier. Now, his mother grieved over him, like mine would me. Uh, but I was still pretty damn happy about that. you know, we weren't doing the fist in the sky back then, but I should have done that. But um,
That is
well,
the response you're describing, is that because you talk about these frustrations that are building. We're getting hit, we're getting trapped, we're getting ambushed, and then it's a lot of the times we're not able to fight back. And now here's a crystal clear case where you can, literally hit back. Is that where that feeling of
yeah,
is that where that feeling comes from? Finally.
exhilarating, believe me.
Yeah.
That's when I realized, I hammered my troops about their behavior toward POWs or detainees who are probably POWs, but we don't know that necessarily. Early on, in dealing with POWs or detainees, uh, I turned it over. I turned the POW, let's say, over to the platoon, basically the platoon that was the nearest or the one that enabled us to capture by whatever means. Much of the time, they may have been we may have sneaked up on them, which we were capable of doing, um, or and night operations. We were able to go into one area one night, and we caught the old VC in the bed with his mama sons, with their mama sons. We walked by those little huts. Every time we'd walk by, we would be sent into that area to ambush canals and go after the enemy if they fired mortars or Katyushas over into the division headquarters, the Ninth Division base camp, which was very large, and they were very good at sneaking in position to do that. So the division commander says, send these grunts in there. I'm tired of my sleep being interrupted, I guess is what he said, and want to put a stop to this. So we were sent into this one area 2 or 3 times, but we were forced to go in the afternoon in daylight. We were mortared twice, and they shot us up with AKs. And they didn't do much damage to us just because we ducked down behind a rice paddy dike, and even if it had water in it, we'd still do that. And and protect ourselves, and then they would flee, and we would. So one day I got permission to go in there at night and to go to the canals nearby and stay for 3 days. Man, I was elated. And we shot a couple up, and one of them we took him as a detainee, but he was sick. Had a mask on, some kind of cloth mask, and he had a fever. I didn't know all this until we walked away with him, but I put it. I put him in. I put my mortar platoon in charge of bringing him along, and we were moving through. This is night. Night is difficult. We were moving directly on an azimuth to an ambush site that was a couple of kilometers away, and that makes, oh, you can cover that in no time. No, you can't. We had water obstacles and various other things we had to deal with. And so about halfway there, I got a notification from my mortar platoon that his men reported that detainee died. passive voice. Okay, well, I said, well, bring him to my location. I know you're close by. Bring him up. We'll leave him here. And there was a little peasant house there that we found, come upon, and uh, they brought this guy up and laid him out, and he was very pale. He was dead. And I said, how did he die? Well, the acting platoon leader says, I don't know. They just said he died. So I pushed on his chest and water came out of his mouth. You know what that means. I said, damn it. It looks to me like you drowned him. And I'll deal with the two guys who were in charge of looking after him, brought him up there. I said, I'll deal with you guys later when we get back to the rear area, but I really believe you drowned this guy. And so we left him there with this little uh, peasant hooch that was kind of it all by itself out there with a woman, an old lady sitting in a some kind of a fabricated stool thing. And anyway, we left him there, and so that the people could at least know what happened to him. Right? And that was very, very disturbing to me. But that was the first incident. But later on, I had POWs who, quote, ran and were shot. I couldn't prosecute. There were men who would vouch for the fact that they ran. This happened twice. And then from that time on, I made sure the POWs, especially at night, were kept under watch close by me.
Did you feel, as you're experiencing these things, did you feel that you were losing the soldiers sort of psychologically, or I mean, what was going on with your soldiers? I mean, in a way, I think the answer to this is kind of obvious, but what's going on with the soldiers that this kind of thing is happening? It's I think it's not hard to understand why it happened, but it's not supposed to happen. So what was going on with the soldiers?
Uh, well, in the case of the mortar platoon men, I can almost understand. They're wanting to get rid of this anchor because he was sick. We were going through water obstacles sometimes. We had two. We'd gone through one that was quite deep. I was 6'1" then, and I was standing on my tiptoes, and the water was up about here on me. And the shorter guys, I found out later they were on somebody's back. This Vietnamese guy, he wasn't about 5'5", maybe 5'6". I don't know how tall he was. He was quite short. He might have drowned. Okay, it's conceivable. So how do you prosecute somebody under those conditions? But POWs are a huge burden, even if you're not going through such obstacles, because they will do anything to get away from you, including killing you. You got to keep that in the back of your mind all the time. So make sure this guy can't get at something or somebody in a way that he can end up killing some of your troops to get away. So I know one time I and one of my platoon sergeants, we were investigated because we'd taken a POW and we had to kind of beat him up a bit because he was trying to stay in a helicopter that came to take his leader away. The intelligence folks wanted him right away. So they sent a little helicopter to pick him up. And so this guy did not want to stay with us ground troops. I can understand that in a way, but we were forced to keep him. Well, we went on air mobile operations for 2 days after that. And I told my acting platoon sergeant, okay, we've got this guy. He's a detainee, but I'm pretty convinced that he's a local Viet Cong, period. And because he was with them, and he didn't have a gun on him. That's the only reason that he wasn't shot, probably. But I told my guys, tie his hands behind his back, put a rope around his neck. Tell you guys, when they get on the chopper, he gets on by whatever method you have to put him on there. When they get off, he follows. And, you got him on a rope, make sure he comes along. And we did that. We didn't have any significant engagements, fortunately. But now, by the time we finished those air mobile operations, now he had a big bruise in his ribs where that acting platoon sergeant helped him get out of that helicopter. That he was a loach, and he'd wrapped his arms around the intercom wires and didn't want to leave it because the known prisoner was already in the chopper, and he helped put him in there, but then he jumped in. Well, that platoon sergeant, we were being shot at, by the way, and I told him, get him out of there by whatever means. Just don't shoot him. And he put big old Indiana farm boy, put the butt of his M16 in that guy's ribs, and he gladly got out of there. Okay, so when we turned him over to the MPs, he was raw around his neck, absolutely. Raw around his wrist, absolutely. And he had a big bruise in his side. So he complains that he was mistreated. Okay, sort of from his perspective, I'm sure he was. So they investigated us. And my platoon sergeant wrote a big, long detail of what transpired, and so did I. I was ordered to do it by my battalion commander, and I told him we need the testimony from the platoon sergeants as well. And we never heard anything more about it. It was well justified because that chopper, the remainder of that squad that got away from us, that VC squad, they were across this cleared area where the chopper landed. They were shooting at us. The green tracers were zipping over our heads. I was afraid they were going to shoot the chopper. I don't think they knew what we were doing, maybe, because their own was in the chopper.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Anyway, but those things happen.